My name is Susan Colbert. I am interviewing Norbert Huether on August the 24th, 2020 at the Sparta Public Library in Sparta, Illinois. Mr. Huether, I have a few questions. Start with biographical questions. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Washington, Missouri in 1930.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father was George Huether and my mother was Lena, and she was a homemaker, and he worked at several different places. He was a bartender. He worked in a box factory when they made boxes, cardboard boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked in the same building when the box factory went under and it became a brewery, the Cardinal Beer. You probably never heard of Cardinal Beer
Mm-hmm.
because it's not made anymore. And then he worked for Gamble Scoville. I don't know if you've heard of them. They were Western auto stores, like only the name was Gamble Scoville, and he worked in the warehouse there, which all the same building, and it finally burned down. So then they had to quit.
Do you have siblings?
I had two sisters.
What are their names?
Georgianne, and she's 2 years younger than I am. She lives out in California. And my other sister was Audrey, and she's 4 years younger than I am. It was 2 years apart away. And she lives in Washington, yeah.
Were they in the military?
No.
What were you doing before you joined the service?
Before I joined the service, I was working for Kroger, and I worked for them for 42 years, so.
In what year did you join the service and how long did you serve?
I joined in 1950 with two buddies that they talked me into it, and we were going to get drafted pretty quick anyhow, so I got out in 1954, so approximately 4 years.
Where were you living when you joined the service?
I was living at home in Washington, Missouri.
In which branch of the military did you serve?
I was in the Navy.
You said you were enlisted.
Yes.
Why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
Because the other two guys went.
What happened when you departed for training camp and during your first days of training?
Well, let's see, I had to go to St. Louis, Union Station. First time I've been there was trains all over the place, and hopefully we'll get on the right one. I went to training in San Diego, California, first time. In fact, it went right by my house, block from my house. I could have waited at home and caught the train going back. I lived a block up from the railroad tracks.
And what did you do during your early days of training?
Well, we did a lot of marching and stuff like that. We were supposed to do the last thing that we didn't do was they taught you how to tie a ship, to the dock and all that, the different knots.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's when the Chinese came out into Korea, and then they cut our boot camp short. Said you got enough, you're out of here. So I didn't learn how to tie them ships tight, so maybe we were somehow get away.
Do you recall your instructors? And if you do, what were they like?
Oh, they were all nice. I don't remember their names anymore. Us three guys were all together at first, until we went off to school or a ship. And basically get up in the morning and go to bed at night.
What did you think of basic training?
Well, it was different. That's something I hadn't done. I didn't know how to swim or anything. And we had to learn how to swim. If you couldn't swim, at first you just swam from just a small area, just from one side to the other side, but if you couldn't swim, you had to swim the length of the pool one way and then back again before they let you go. And it was around Christmas time. I thought I'd get to go home for Christmas, but we didn't get to go home. We got shipped out instead.
What was the worst part of boot camp?
I don't know.
Did you miss your activities at home and the people that you associated with at home?
Yeah, and I spent my first Christmas in boot camp too. You know, something different because we were always family, and that was probably the worst part.
About how old were you when
I
you?
was 20.
Did you receive any specialized training?
In boot camp? Not in boot camp, no, not really.
How about later on?
Well, I went to, later on, they'd asked you, you got three choices if you, schools, and of course, you named three schools you didn't want to go to, but they're going to send you to the one they're going to want to, anyhow. I ended going up to a hospital school. I ended up as a corpsman in the Navy, took care of patients, and went to, Portsmouth, Virginia is where I went to go to Corps school. And what we did there was, we learned everything. We learned to give each other, I could have done this, but
Your blood test.
same as a nurse. Sometimes the nurses, later on, when I was stationed in the hospital, sometimes the nurses couldn't find a vein or something, they'd call on the corpsman. And because sometimes your veins are, but we gave each other shots and used water when we was in school.
So you learned to do labs and take blood, bandage. Did you learn those kind of things?
We later on you got stationed in a hospital or someplace. Why someone went into the lab. I just went on the ward. I got stationed after I got out of Memphis. Portsmouth, Virginia. I got stationed in a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'd come home on weekends and hitchhike.
How far was that from Memphis to your home?
Oh, I don't know. The first time I could have went home, there was one of the guys that I went in with. He got sent to Kwajalein Island, and it was really rocky and rough, and his legs couldn't stand it. He got out right away. He came out, getting out of the Navy through Memphis, where I was stationed at. And the first weekend he was going to go home, I was going to go with him. I got caught sleeping on duty, and I got restricted, so I didn't get to go. But otherwise, I'd go and I'd catch a ride with somebody as far as St. Louis, and then hitchhike the rest of the way home past the Diamonds, it was called, their old 66. You're familiar with old Highway 66. We'd come home on weekends and then go back.
How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regimen, barracks, food, and social life?
Well, there wasn't much social life, and especially in boot camp, you didn't get to go off off the you call it the reservations if you want, I guess. But the food wasn't all that bad. You just put up with it.
Where did you serve?
Well, from Memphis, Tennessee, I went to, that was my hospital. And the main thing that we worried about, the Marines got their medics from the Navy. And I really didn't want to go to the Marines because then we'd have been in the war. In fact, I guess we volunteered to go in, and then a friend of mine at about the same age, he got drafted 2 weeks after I did, so I would have been drafted too, and he ended up over in Korea as a cook on land, was sitting out there, you know, on the ship, you know, and had nice quarters to sleep in.
So you were close to Korea, and you were in the Korean War.
We were anchored in Incheon Harbor. First, when I first got out of from Tennessee, didn't get shipped to the Marines. I got shipped to the Air Force Army Triple Armor Hospital in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we had our own building. We were our own. They had airmen there from the Air Force that were corpsmen, but they couldn't do everything we did. They just kind of did. I mean, they couldn't give shots, couldn't do drug transfusions and a lot of things. And so we was pretty well on our own. And how I got out of there was, you know, this huge hospital ship came through, and they had all the people picked out that were that supposedly volunteered to go aboard. But then there was a bunch of us that decided we wanted to be the best way to get home, or the fastest way probably was to go and volunteer to go aboard the hospital ship, because from Hawaii they probably had been on our own, have to pay our own and stuff like that and get back. So we volunteered to go to the hospital ship Constellation, and that's how I got on there, and that was how I spent the war in Incheon Harbor after that.
What kind of friendships did you form while serving?
Well, one of my best man at my wedding ended up from Massachusetts. He was out. He got out before I did, and he got married. Well, he was home on leave one time, and his wife came out to California when we was back and getting repairs stuff to the ship like that a long time. So he came back to Missouri and was my best man in my wedding.
So you formed a very close friendship.
He wrote the letter that I wrote to my future father-in-law asking him to marry my wife. All I did was sign it. I hope this don't get
a good friend. Did you have other friendships too then?
Yeah, there was other guys. We went put a lot of liberty in. We'd come back to stay in Incheon Harbor for a certain length of time. There was always 2 hospital ships there, and then there was 3 of them in service. One of them always was back. It was one from a foreign country, and I don't remember what it was. But a lot of the patients wanted to go on that one because they had liquor on that one. All we had was denatured alcohol.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Well, basically just writing.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Well, we played a lot of cards. Of course, we stayed so long in Incheon, and then like I said, it was 3 ships, and when 2 of them were always there, and one of them went back to the States for repairs and stuff like that. But in between time, we'd go back to Yokosuka, Japan, and leave off the patients that weren't definitely going back to out on duty, you know, that was too far. And then lost my train of thought.
Were you able to get off the ship then in Japan?
Oh yeah, we went, we pulled, half of us would go on R&R, they called it, to a hotel. It used to be a Japanese hotel, and they had everything up there. I mean, they'd wait on you, boy, and wait to get out, come out, wait on you, you know. And we'd get 3 or 4 days like that, half the crew, and then go back. Otherwise, we'd just stay aboard ship and doing a lot of cleaning. Got busy. Otherwise, they'd put you on the regular ship's crew, and then you had chip paint and stuff like that, maybe.
What was your most memorable experience while serving?
Well, I stood right, one of the things I remember, I stood right where the bomb on Hiroshima dropped. I stood right there, and it had dropped up above us, you know. They had a thing memorial there. Ted Williams, the ball player, was a patient of mine when I first went aboard ship. I was on the officers' ward taking care of patients, and I ended up in what they call the CSR, the Central Supply Room, which was right next to the surgery. And so we didn't have any patients there. We just took care of the sterilizing the different packages that they did surgery with, and wrapped them up and put them in a sterilizer, and then had them there when they needed them. And the needles, we never threw needles away like they do now. If you take a needle, give a guy a shot, and you take a little cotton ball and you run it through there, and if it had a burr on it, then it would get stuck. Well, then you took something and sandpapered it off or whatever. You used them needles over, sterilized them. We didn't. And being right next to one of the things I remember, being next to surgery, they did surgery. They used a lot of denatured alcohol on some stuff like skin grafts and stuff. Well, that had to come through us when they got done, and instead of throwing it away, it went in the something in the cotton bowl where we stored the cotton balls. You could hide them in there, so we'd have some. And go up and get you a Coke, and didn't get a drink without even. We had nurses aboard ship too over there. And we pulled duty, Liberty, say like in Japan. We didn't go ashore much in Incheon Harbor. You could go over there, but in Japan, the nurses would go ashore too. And the thing was, when we got back to the ship, they would inspect us, but they didn't frisk the nurses, so we wait for a nurse to come back before we went aboard ship and have them take a bottle.
What did you think of the people you served with?
Oh, everybody was really, really nice. I mean, I wish I could have kept and tracked some of them more, but in them days we didn't. After we got out, the next time I got a hold of the guy that was the best man at my wedding, he had just died. So
What was the highest rank you ever achieved?
It's called HM2. You were a seaman until you went to school, and then you were an HM hospital, whatever, and then there was a HM1, HM2, and HM3, and I was HM2. You had to take tests to get the rank, be eligible.
You already told us the name of the ship that you were on, and your duties on board was as a medic.
Yeah, when I first got aboard on the ship, I mean, like I said, I was up in the hospital ward, and you got your patients. Our deck was where the patients come through, and we got our patients. We were the only ship out of the three that had a helicopter deck. And if you've ever watched MASH, how the guys were tied on the side, that's how we got them, tied to the side of the helicopter on the outside. And then they bring them in, and they decided what ward they should go on, for if they're going to have surgery and all this stuff. And that's where I started at, and then I got down into the central supply where I didn't have to take care of patients, and we just kept everything supplied and sterilized.
Were you ever stationed on land?
You mean in Korea?
Well, anywhere on land. Korea too.
Well, I mean, I went to school in Portsmouth, Virginia. That was on land, and then in Memphis, Tennessee, the hospital there. I was stationed there and then when I went to Hawaii, I was on land. We used to put our shorts on, our swimming suit, and then hop the bus and go down to Waikiki Beach.
Did you ever see naval combat?
No.
What were the living conditions like on board?
Well, you had these rows of hammocks, and you had one, two, maybe two of them, and then you might stay on the bottom one, and then the next guy be on the top one, have to climb up there. It wasn't all that crowded, really. And then you went to chow. We had pretty good food. We spent Christmas, I remember the first Christmas we got a little fir tree or something on land from Incheon there, and we decorated and had cotton balls in there, string cotton, popcorn, we had popcorn, of course, there. And we had I guess we had, that was when we had our Christmas party, when we invited the captain of the regular crew to our Christmas party. And we had a table here, along here. He'd go up and he'd come up and wanted a drink, and he says, I want some of that underneath. He knew what was under there, For the rest of us, we didn't get the strong stuff unless we brought it ourselves or something on.
What was the longest cruise you took?
Well, I guess from Japan to, at one time, from Japan, you cruise to Japan, back home. We'd go home every so often. I guess we'd come back and we'd spend 30 days at home. More longer than that, sometimes you could take a 30-day leave, come home 30 days.
How long did it take for the ship to get from Japan back home?
Oh, I don't remember. We went to Hong Kong once. I remember they anchored out in the harbor there, and these sampans would come, they wanted to come aboard and sell you something like that. We turned the fire hoses on them. We wouldn't let them up.
Where were you when your period of service was up?
I was back in the States. We had come back for our repairs and all that stuff, and it wasn't officially the time yet. My 4 years were up, but they had take me aboard ship and go on wherever there, and then turn me right around and come back. So they just left me off early, a couple of weeks. I was out in California.
And how did you return home from California?
Luckily, I didn't return home like I first planned. There was some friends that got out at the same time and lived back this way, and they was renting a car, or I had a car out there, I guess, and they were going to stop in Las Vegas, and we just had our Mustang and I pay, and I was tempted to go along, but I decided not to, so I came home on a bus. I'd have probably spent it all.
How were you received by your family and community when you got back?
Well, it wasn't too long. I went back to work at Kroger's. That's where I started at. And my wife, we got married 2 weeks. See, I enlisted for 4 years in the Navy, but I enlisted for life when I got back. Got married in 2 weeks or so. She had everything planned, had a house rented, had the home, I had everything. So all I did was come back.
And you were married quite a few years, were you not?
Yeah, I'll forget how long I don't remember what exactly day she died. Early 2000s, so.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
Well, pretty well went right back to work. And of course I had another boss, I got married, so.
What was the biggest surprise about civilian workplace?
When I come back.
Was it the same as when you left?
Basically the same, yeah. I went back to work, same grocery store. And
have you remained in contact with, and I know you have already answered that question, you did remain in contact with one of your fellow veterans.
Yeah.
Any others?
Well, it was a couple, we didn't keep in contact too long, but there was a couple other ones. I forget where they were. They weren't as far away as Boston, though.
Are you a member of any of the veterans organizations?
American Legion, part of.
How did your service experiences affect your life?
Well, it put it for a standstill for a while, you know, for 4 years, and then, high moment. Nothing really, I guess. I come back and went back to work, what I was doing.
Did you learn some key knowledge or skills, abilities, and experiences from your time in the military?
Well, I did things that I didn't think I would do, you know, like giving shots and taking, and you know, working. I could have probably come back and went into nursing. I don't think they had too many male nurses at that time, but things like that.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Didn't I scratch that one off?
You may, absolutely.
No, I guess I didn't.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Well,
Would you choose the Navy again if you were young and was going to choose to be in the
I
military?
probably would, yeah. There was 2 of us went in the Navy. Well, no, all 3 of us went in the Navy. And a friend of mine that our birthdays was about the same, and he got drafted after I left. He ended up in the Army. Like I said, he ended up on land. And so, of course, I didn't know how to swim when I went in, but I learned.
And you learned.
They put you get way up on the diving board, on a diving board, and you jump. I know if you hesitate, they push you. So, but you only have to swim a little ways when you get there, if you can swim. But I could swim that. I ended up the length of the pool, like I said, I have to swim both ways, and thought I'd get to go home for Christmas. Then I did, but then the Chinese came out, and we didn't get to go home for Christmas.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Well, no, I don't guess so.
What was your most frightening experience when you were while you were in the military?
Well, we had to, which we were anchored out there in China, we had a few warnings about a plane coming over, you know, because you're not supposed to bomb hospital people, or even like shoot at people on land either, but they do. But we had a few of those, or you go down below deck and you don't know what's going on until they tell you it's ready to go. But as far as seeing any war, you know, besides the results of the war, patients coming in, I didn't really see any of that.
What was your most exhausting experience? What about your most exciting?
Well, we didn't really do anything exciting except go out on the town in Yokosuka on Liberty, and we won't talk about that.
And you mentioned about seeing the famous baseball player.
Yeah, Ted Williams.
Was there any part of your job that you were especially good at?
Well, I guess sometimes, I don't know, of course, all the nurses were probably young too, but sometimes they couldn't get a vein like if they usually called on us. I guess that's one of the things we, for some reason or another,
You were good at. Was there any part of your job that you especially enjoyed?
I was just, I enjoyed chasing some of the patients around with I can remember we had a black guy there and he was supposed to be getting shot, and I got a great big old, what do you call it, where you put the needle on, we had a big one there.
Syringe?
Syringe, yeah, but big, and the needle wouldn't fit on the bottom, but I held the needle on there and I'd say, hey, it's your turn, and chase them around.
Did you chase a lot of people around with needles?
No, this is just this one guy. We had some patients, when I first went to down to Memphis, we had a lot of patients that had frostbite. That's when the Chinese came out and stuff like that. We had a lot of patients that they had to learn how to treat frostbite. We had one where we were going back to Japan, I think, and I don't know where this ship was going, but anyway, we transferred a patient that I don't know what, I don't remember what he had or what anything, but we transferred him by rope, line rather, and put him in tied him on there, this ship was over here and we were over here. This ship was going up and down, and we were going up and down, and he was going up and down. We transferred one like that had to go back to where we weren't going, so.
From one ship to another with a rope?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, is there anything else that you would like to talk about while we're doing this interview?
No, I tell you what, I do think for just to be in, and had been in war, and all of that, it was luckily there, a lot of people got killed in Japan, but there'd been a lot more service, Americans been killed if it wouldn't been for the atomic bomb. But, and I just got through reading the book about the atomic bomb and all that stuff, and the wars, and how the Japanese soldiers, they were, when they were on an island someplace, you had, a lot of them had caves, you had to dig them out because they weren't surrendering. And, but when we got over there, when I was over there, there was no animosity or nothing. I can remember being over there in one of them, we call them bars or whatever, anyway, I can remember playing when the Saints come marching in, the band already knew how to play American tunes. The band Saints come marching in. And one time we was up on the second deck there, and I don't know what was on the first floor there, but in Yokosuka, and it was a bar like, dancing and stuff, and once they said shore patrol's coming, we were the first ones, then we were down, and we passed them on the way out.
Well, I guess this concludes our interview. Thank you for taking part in it, and thank you for your service.